The reception hall of Oak Bank was dressed in quiet elegance. Sunlight poured through two-story windows, glinting off marble tiles and glass fixtures. The space was silent, controlled, humming with the assurance of old money and polished reputations. Conversations were soft, laughter restrained, and no one stood too long in one place, unless, of course, something wasn't quite right. And then the doors opened. Ayanna Brooks, just 11 years old, stepped inside. Her frame was small, but her presence carried something unmistakable: confidence. She wore her school uniform neatly: white short-sleeve blouse, gray pleated skirt, socks pulled up perfectly. Her shoes were freshly cleaned, her pink backpack zipped tight. In her hand, she clutched a sealed envelope that bore the weight of achievement most adults never know: a $10,000 scholarship check, won through grit, intelligence, and months of relentless effort in a national youth engineering competition. Today was supposed to be simple, a milestone, a first taste of adulthood. Her father had told her, "Go ahead, Ayanna. This one's yours. You've earned it." And she believed him. She approached the counter, eyes bright with pride. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft but sure. Behind the desk stood Brent Lawson, a man in his 30s, clean-cut, neatly dressed, and utterly unreadable. He glanced at Ayanna, then the check, then at Ayanna again. His expression didn't change. His smile didn't come. "You here by yourself?" he asked, already reaching for the check. "Yes, sir," she said. "My dad signed the deposit slip. I have the letter from the foundation, too." Brent didn't respond. He turned the check over slowly, held it to the light. "10,000, he muttered. "Big check for a little girl." The compliment never came. Instead, silence filled the space. Behind Ayanna, the line began to grow. Someone coughed. A woman shifted her purse with impatience. Brent leaned back, pressed a discreet button under the desk. Moments later, Danielle Mercer, the branch manager, emerged from her glass office. Tailored gray blazer, pin-perfect posture, red lipstick not yet smudged. She moved like someone accustomed to being listened to. She looked at Ayanna with an almost motherly smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hi there," Danielle said gently. "Can I speak with you just over here for a second?" Ayanna followed, confused but obedient. Danielle guided her toward a side consultation room. Small, sterile, too quiet. "We just need to verify a few things," she said. "It's standard." Except it wasn't. Ayanna sat in the chair, her backpack in her lap, while Danielle and Brent whispered outside the glass. They didn't wave her father in. They didn't ask for more documentation. They didn't smile again. She wasn't being congratulated. She was being contained. She looked down at the journal tucked into her bag, a soft leather-bound notebook her father gave her when she turned 9. "You'll need this," he had said. "The world doesn't always remember girls like you, so you write it down." And so she did. She opened the journal, clicked her pen, and began. Because something in her, something deeper than fear, knew this moment wasn't about a check. It was about being seen or refused. And though no one clapped when she entered that bank, she had never needed applause, just truth. This story contains a truth that has changed many people's lives. If you've ever felt stuck, overlooked, or doubted, comment the number 7. Subscribe to our channel for real stories that expose, uplift, and empower. Share this video to spread the strength of voices that refuse to be silenced. The consultation room was quiet but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that stretched thin, like a silence that didn't want to be broken, because breaking it might mean saying something no one wanted to hear. Ayanna Brooks sat on the edge of a sleek leather chair, feet barely brushing the polished floor. Her pink backpack was in her lap, both arms wrapped around it like a seatbelt. Her scholarship check had already disappeared into the hands of adults who hadn't offered so much as a congratulations. Across from her sat Danielle Mercer, the branch manager. She smiled, but Ayanna noticed something strange about it. It wasn't warm. It didn't feel earned. It felt practiced, like the kind of smile you give a student when you're about to hand back a failing paper. "So, Ayanna," Danielle began, folding her hands neatly over a clipboard, "tell me again, where exactly did you get this check?" Ayanna kept her voice steady. "I won the National STEM Youth Challenge. It's from the Franklin Engineering Institute. I built a solar water purifier for low-income farming families." Danielle nodded slowly, lips still curved slightly. That's very impressive. Then with a tilt of her head, but $10,000? That's quite a lot, don't you think? Ayana blinked. That's what the letter says, she replied, reaching into her backpack and offering the official envelope again. Danielle didn't reach for it. Instead, she looked at Brent Lawson, still standing silently in the corner, and offered him the faintest raise of her eyebrows. Brent moved to the computer and began typing. Ayana watched the exchange. The looks, the nonverbal language, the silent signals that adults pass between each other when they were choosing how to treat someone. The smiles never dropped, but something colder hung beneath them now. Danielle leaned forward slightly, her voice gentle but clipped. You have to understand, we've seen unusual activity before. Sometimes people are taken advantage of. Sometimes checks are faked. Not that we're saying that's what's happening here, of course not, but we do have to verify. The implications stung more than if they just said it outright. You don't look like someone who should have this kind of money. You don't belong in this room. And we're not going to say it, but we'll smile while making sure you feel it anyway. Ayana didn't answer. Instead, she opened her notebook. She wrote down the time, the phrase unusual activity before, the exact wording. Not that we're saying that's what's happening here, Danielle noticed. What are you writing, sweetie? She asked, voice sugar sweet. My journal, Ayana answered. I write down things I don't want to forget. Danielle gave another soft smile. That's nice. But she didn't mean it, because in that moment, the walls of the consultation room didn't hold conversations. They held assumptions, wrapped in politeness, covered with protocol, hidden under perfect posture and lowercase voices. And Ayana saw through it all, because her father had once told her, sometimes the worst prejudice doesn't yell, it smiles. It offers you water, asks soft questions, and still treats you like a threat. Now sitting in a bank she had entered with nothing but pride, Ayana understood what he meant. She wasn't just being doubted. She was being dismissed politely. And even at 11 years old, she knew exactly what kind of danger lived inside a smile that didn't see her. There were no handcuffs, no locked doors, no official charges. But Ayana Brooks, 11 years old, was a prisoner just the same. After 15 minutes of waiting in the so-called consultation room, Danielle Mercer stepped back in with another smile. A thinner one this time, stretched tight like plastic wrap. Ayana, she said, we're going to have you stay right here while we verify everything, okay? You understand, it's just bank policy. Ayana gave a small nod, though something inside her said this wasn't about policy. If it had been, they wouldn't have asked her to hand over her folder. If it had been, they would have already called her father. If it had been, they wouldn't have looked so nervous when she started writing things down. Danielle turned on her heels and walked out again, closing the door gently behind her. A soft click echoed in the room, the kind of click that didn't mean locked, but meant closed off. And so Ayana sat, not officially held, but not allowed to leave. The room was glass-walled, transparent on three sides, but it may as well have been a cell. Customers walked past without looking in. Some noticed her and turned quickly away, as if ashamed to have seen her at all. Staff passed by in pairs, whispering, nodding toward her with half-curious glances. No one made eye contact. No one smiled. She had never felt so visible, and yet so invisible at the same time. Her check was gone. Her backpack sat heavy in her lap. Her fingers tightened around her pen as she returned to her notebook, her lifeline in a space designed to mute her. 11:36 a.m. Still here. No one has explained anything. No one has called Dad. They keep saying just a few more minutes. It's been 23. On the other side of the glass, she saw Brent Lawson pointing toward her while talking to another employee. His hands moved quickly. The other man frowned. Ayana wrote that down too. Gestures. Watching me. Like I've done something. She hadn't. All she had done was win. All she had done was walk into a building she believed would treat her fairly, with a check that represented months of innovation, late nights, and belief in a better world. But none of that mattered now. Not here. She wasn't just being questioned, she was being contained, not for what she had done, but for who they assumed she was. And the worst part was how normal it all looked. No shouting, no confrontation, just quiet detainment behind glass, beneath the hum of fluorescent lighting and the soft tapping of keyboards. It looked like a meeting. It felt like a cage. But Ayanna wouldn't cry. She wouldn't panic. She wrote, because even if no one else saw her clearly, even if no one thought to ask her side of the story, she was leaving a record, not for them, for the truth. And the truth she believed with all her heart would one day speak louder than their silence. The seconds passed like hours inside the glass-walled room, and Ayanna Brooks continued to write, documenting her detainment, every look, every word, every excuse disguised as policy. But it wasn't just about the unfairness anymore. Something deeper had begun to stir, something off. The adults were no longer just skeptical, they were nervous. She noticed it in the way Brent Lawson stopped glancing at her and started avoiding the room entirely. In the way Danielle Mercer walked briskly across the floor with her head lowered, whispering into her phone. In the way a third man, someone unfamiliar, not in uniform, entered through a side door and was quickly ushered to Danielle's office. That was when Ayanna really began to pay attention. She turned in her seat, positioning herself just enough to see through the frosted corners of the glass that separated the consultation room from the rest of the bank. Danielle had shut her office door, the blinds were drawn, but through a narrow slat left slightly ajar, Ayanna could see silhouettes. She recognized Danielle's sharp posture, but the man standing across from her was new. Tall, white, in a dark gray suit with no name badge. He was holding a folder, thick, confidential looking. Ayanna's heart began to pound. She slid lower in her chair, careful to keep still. Her fingers opened her notebook again, pen at the ready. 12:08 p.m. Danielle met with unknown man. Closed door, blinds down, folder exchange. She leaned slightly closer to the edge of the glass. The voices were muffled, but a few words bled through. Don't have long. Not supposed to be today. Use the girl. She's slowing things down. Ayanna froze. The girl. They were talking about her. A sudden chill ran through her spine. She wasn't just being delayed for security checks. She wasn't even being profiled anymore. She was being used. Danielle's voice now, sharper, anxious. What if someone sees? The man scoffed. It's a child. She doesn't know what she's seeing. You already flagged the check. No one's going to question a fraud alert. Just upload the last of it and get me that drive. Ayanna's mind began spinning. Drive? Upload? What were they moving? Then she remembered something her father told her about once over dinner. Corporate espionage doesn't always look like men in black suits stealing computers. Sometimes it's a flash drive passed across a desk while no one's paying attention. Ayanna turned back to her notebook and started writing faster. 12:10 p.m. Overheard phrases, use the girl, she's slowing things down, upload, drive. She knew she needed more. Reaching into her backpack, she pulled out the small pen-sized recording device her dad had given her for her science club project, a simple tool they'd use to capture interviews. She clicked it on and pointed it subtly toward the door. The voices kept going. You have 2 hours. Hastings is expecting the data today. If it doesn't go through, we both burn. Hastings. That name jolted her memory. Richard Hastings, CEO of Vance Core Financial, a rival to her mother's firm. Her mother had mentioned him in passing during dinner one night, calling him a shark with no shoreline. And now Danielle was working with him? Ayanna gripped the recorder tighter. This wasn't just about her check anymore. It wasn't just about bias or being disrespected as a child. This was a criminal act, and she had walked right into the middle of it. She carefully shut off the recorder and slid it back into her bag, now fully aware of the gravity of what she held. The bank hadn't just underestimated her, they had overlooked her entirely. Because she was small, because she was quiet, because they never imagined the girl behind the glass would not only see everything, but capture it. Ayanna closed her notebook, steady now. The pen clicked shut like a signature. Let them think she was just a child with a check. They had no idea she was also a witness with proof. For the past hour, Ayanna Brooks had been treated like a problem to be managed, not a child to be helped. Each adult who passed her glass room did so with indifference. The staff wore the same neutral gray uniforms. moved with the same programmed politeness, and upheld the same silent wall that separated her from fairness. She had learned something important in that silence. Not every adult in uniform stands for justice. But that belief wavered slightly the moment Tiana Clark entered the room. She looked different, not in clothing, but in energy. Younger than the others, maybe mid-20s. Her posture was less stiff, her eyes less rehearsed. She stepped inside with a clipboard clutched to her chest, glancing at Ayanna with a flicker of concern she didn't bother hiding. "Hi there," Tiana said gently, her voice quieter than the room. Ayanna looked up but didn't speak. "I just wanted to check on you," Tiana added. "You've been in here a while." Ayanna paused, trying to read her. The adults before had smiled too, Danielle, Brent, but their smiles were rehearsed, measured. This one wasn't. "They said they were verifying my check," Ayanna replied softly. Tiana frowned. "The STEM scholarship one?" Ayanna blinked. "Yes. How did you know?" "I read your award letter earlier. It came through my queue first before Danielle rerouted it. I remember thinking, wow, this girl's a genius." Her smile this time was real. "That project of yours, solar irrigation, right? It's incredible." Ayanna felt her shoulders ease just a little. It was the first genuine compliment she'd received since entering the bank. Tiana sat across from her, lowering her voice. "Ayanna, I don't think they're just verifying your check. I've worked here long enough to know when something's off. And what's happening to you right now? It's not protocol." Ayanna hesitated, then glanced at the door. "They're in that office," she whispered. "There's a man. They closed the blinds. I heard them talking about drives and uploads. I think they're doing something wrong, and they're using me to stall." Tiana didn't move, but her expression changed, focused, intense. "Did you hear names?" Ayanna nodded. "Hastings. I wrote it all down." She unzipped her backpack slowly and handed Tiana her leather-bound notebook. Inside were pages of notes, times, names, fragments of overheard dialogue. Tiana flipped through it, her eyes widening with every page. "Girl," she said under her breath, "you're not just smart, you're brave." "I recorded part of it," Ayanna added quietly. Tiana looked up sharply. "You have the audio?" Ayanna nodded. Tiana stood, heart pounding. "Okay, this changes everything." Ayanna's voice trembled for the first time. "What are you going to do?" Tiana stepped closer and whispered, "I'm going to help you walk out of here, with your check, your voice, and your story intact. I've seen enough here to know this place needs cleaning out, and maybe you're the one who finally forces them to do it." Just then, a shadow passed by the glass. Tiana straightened, gave Ayanna a nod that said, "Follow my lead," and opened the door. As they stepped into the hall, the bank carried on as if nothing was wrong. Phones rang, shoes clicked, laughter from the coffee machine corner. But something had shifted. For the first time, Ayanna was not walking alone. Behind gray uniforms, behind a clipboard and a warm voice, she had found an ally, and that changed everything. If this moment gave you hope, comment with the number 7. If you think the story hasn't surprised you yet, comment with 0. Subscribe to our channel for the next dramatic reveal. Share this story to inspire someone who might feel unseen, because the quietest strength often wears a uniform no one expects. The calm in the lobby of Oak Bank was an illusion, a polished, manicured stillness that tried to mask what was unraveling beneath it. Staff moved like dancers in a silent routine. Customers chatted quietly. And behind the glass doors of the consultation room, Ayanna Brooks was being shuffled from shadow to shadow, like a question no one wanted to answer. And then the front doors opened. There was no alarm, no sudden noise, just the soft hiss of the automatic doors and the deliberate sound of leather shoes against marble. Dr. Elias Brooks entered the bank the way a judge enters a courtroom. Shoulders squared, suit perfectly pressed, presence unmistakable. He carried no briefcase, no folder, just a phone in one hand and a quiet fury in his eyes. Every step he took across the lobby was controlled, silent, and heavy with unspoken intent. At first, no one noticed, but the room began to shift. Brent Lawson, mid-sentence with a customer, froze and turned pale. Danielle Mercer, stepping out of her office with Richard Hastings' courier folder in hand, looked up. and the color drained from her face. Because they didn't just see a man, they recognized a name. Elias Brooks wasn't just Ayanna's father. He was one of the most respected cybersecurity consultants in the country. Former military intelligence, current federal contractor, and the man who had exposed a Fortune 500 data laundering scheme only a year ago. His work had reshaped corporate compliance policies across the finance sector. And now he was standing in their lobby, looking for his daughter. His voice was low, but it cut through the air like steel. "Where is Ayanna?" Danielle tried to compose herself. "Mr. Brooks, I assure you, we were just—" "You held my 11-year-old daughter," he said, eyes narrowing, "without consent, without contact, and under false suspicion. You detained her while facilitating unauthorized access to restricted internal files. I have the server pings from the last hour. I have the blind spots in your camera feeds. And I have the recording she took because she knew you wouldn't believe her. So she made sure others would." Gasps rippled quietly from behind counters and teller windows. The lobby didn't move. Danielle's smile collapsed. "I don't know what you think." "I don't think," Elias interrupted, stepping closer. "I know, because your name just lit up 3 federal watch lists the moment you uploaded that drive to Hastings' proxy server." He pulled a small device from his coat pocket and handed it to the security guard. "This is a mirrored trace. Take it to your IT director. You'll find the breach in the exact moment your manager tried to disguise it as a transaction delay." In the center of the lobby, customers stopped pretending they weren't listening. Phones were out, eyebrows raised. What began as quiet tension had now become public spectacle. And then, Tiana Clark entered from the side hallway, leading Ayanna by the hand. The moment Elias saw her, his shoulders softened, just for a second. "You okay, baby?" Ayanna nodded. "I have everything. My journal, the audio file." The names. Elias knelt down and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did everything right." Danielle made one last attempt. "This is a misunderstanding." Elias stood taller this time. "No, Ms. Mercer, this is a reckoning." Because in that moment, the power in the room had shifted, not through force, not through shouting, but through truth. And truth had walked in wearing a black suit with a last name everyone in the financial sector had learned not to cross. For a brief moment, no one in the lobby of Oak Bank spoke. The silence was different now, not the stifling hush of polite disregard, but the charged stillness that follows the moment a secret is no longer a secret. The quiet before a structure collapses. Dr. Elias Brooks stood tall in the center of it all, flanked by his daughter Ayanna, still clutching her pink backpack and journal, and Tiana Clark, the only employee who dared to help. Around them, the facade of corporate composure began to tremble. Danielle Mercer had lost her words. The whispers had stopped. Even Brent Lawson, who had smirked just an hour earlier at Ayanna's scholarship check, now stared wide-eyed, as though realizing too late that the girl he dismissed had been the one carrying the match, and the entire building was soaked in kerosene. Elias didn't waste time. He raised his phone and tapped a button. A speaker crackled to life as a recording played loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. "Just use the girl. She's slowing things down. Drive needs to be uploaded today." It was Danielle's voice, clear, panicked, and unmistakably guilty. Gasps followed. Then another voice, male, tense, forceful. "Hastings expects it before noon. Upload the files or it's both our careers." The bank manager's face drained to ash. "I know that voice," one of the senior bank associates whispered. "Isn't that—" "Yes," Elias said calmly. "That is Richard Hastings, Chief Executive Officer of VanceCore Financial. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is corporate espionage, wire fraud, and obstruction, committed inside your institution using my daughter as cover." He pulled out a flash drive and handed it to a uniformed officer who had just entered, summoned quietly by Elias before ever stepping into the building. "The mirrored server activity is on here," Elias explained. "Your IT director will find the breach time-stamped and verified against bank logs. The internal access? It came from Danielle Mercer's desktop." A soft "oh my God" echoed from someone at the teller desk. Ayanna, silent through it all, opened her journal and began to read from her notes. Time logs, overheard phrases, what Danielle wore, where Brent stood. The name Hastings mentioned 3 separate times. Her handwriting, neat and steady, was now evidence. The bank's silence had tried to erase her. Her words now wrote the truth back into the world. Tiana added her own statement, confirming she saw the document handoff. She said it was just a backup, she told the arriving investigators, but she shut down the internal server 5 minutes later and rerouted the connection. I logged it. I didn't know what it was until I saw the recording. The system didn't fall with a bang. It unfolded, like a piece of origami being slowly undone, each layer revealing a lie no longer protected by structure. Danielle was escorted out in handcuffs. Brent resigned on the spot, and the entire branch was placed under temporary federal oversight. But something even more important happened in that moment. Everyone looked at Ayanna differently, not with pity, not with awkward smiles, but with stunned recognition. The girl they had ignored, dismissed, and detained had just exposed a conspiracy because she refused to doubt what she knew was right. It wasn't just a system that had been decoded. It was the illusion that power always knows better, that silence protects, that children don't see what's happening around them. Ayanna had seen it all, and she had written it down. It didn't happen all at once, but slowly, minute by minute, like air being let out of a balloon no one knew had been inflated beyond capacity. Oakdale Bank, once a monument of polished glass and corporate pride, now felt smaller. Not physically, but morally, ethically, emotionally. As if the building itself was ashamed of what it had allowed to happen. The woman who once walked its floors with unchecked authority, Danielle Mercer, now sat in a chair beside the teller wall, head down, hands cuffed, lips pressed tight against the collapse of her image. Just an hour ago, she had been the unquestioned voice of policy, procedure, and protocol. Now she was evidence in motion. Each new revelation peeled away another layer. Tellers who once looked at Ayanna Brooks like an inconvenience now couldn't meet her eyes. The customers who had watched her sit alone behind glass, whispering assumptions and judgment, now whispered something else: regret. In real time, the hierarchy cracked. The once silent staff began asking questions. Why didn't anyone call her father? Who approved the delay? Why was she treated like a threat over a scholarship check? No one had answers, but everyone could see the truth, because the truth had been recorded, transcribed, and recited by an 11-year-old girl with a notebook. A girl who had entered alone, but now stood with her father, her ally, and a reputation built not on her age, but on her actions. Danielle's carefully curated persona shrank under the weight of exposure. Her tailored blazer no longer held its shape. Her posture slumped as the agents handed off reports and USB drives, as Ayanna's journal was photographed for digital record. Even Brent Lawson, the teller who first raised suspicion over Ayanna's check, seemed visibly smaller now, standing in the corner like a boy who had touched fire and pretended it wouldn't burn. And then came the moment that solidified the shift. A representative from the bank's regional executive office entered the room, briefcase in hand, expression unreadable. She listened carefully to the investigators, nodded through Elias Brooks' timeline, reviewed the files, and then walked straight to Ayanna. "I'm sorry," she said plainly. "On behalf of this institution, we owe you far more than an apology. You did nothing wrong, and yet you uncovered what we refused to see." She then turned to the entire floor and raised her voice, not for drama, but for documentation. Effective immediately, this branch will undergo external review. All internal compliance protocols will be audited, and Ayanna Brooks will be publicly recognized by the institution for her composure, courage, and contribution to our accountability. There was no applause, only stillness, because everyone was still processing what had happened. The system hadn't just failed, it had depended on failure to protect itself, and it took someone without a badge, a title, or a suit to make it stop. Ayanna stood quietly through it all, her notebook still clutched to her chest. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Because while the adults had spent the morning trying to protect their power, she had spent it protecting the truth. And now the very walls that once towered above her were crumbling beneath the weight of what they had ignored. In real time, the room had shrunk, but Ayanna, she had never stood taller. Long after the flashing lights dimmed, the statements were filed, and the news trucks rolled away, a quiet stillness returned to Oak Bank. But it wasn't the same kind of quiet that Ayanna Brooks first walked into. It wasn't the polished, professional hush designed to keep discomfort out of sight. This silence held a different weight, a silence born from realization, reflection, and the kind of uncomfortable truth that doesn't fade once the headlines move on. What remained most vivid in everyone's memory wasn't the police presence, the federal agents, or even the dramatic arrest of Danielle Mercer. It was the notebook, a small leather-bound journal in the hands of an 11-year-old girl who had refused to be erased. Ayanna never raised her voice. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. She wrote. While they stalled, she documented. While they smiled and doubted, she recorded every timestamp, every sideways glance, every coded phrase spoken behind closed doors. Her handwriting, careful, consistent, and unshaken, became the most honest record in the building. And it was that notebook, not any adult testimony or security footage, that became the turning point in the entire case. They tried to shrink her. She wrote herself larger. They tried to delay her. She documented their motives. They tried to pretend nothing was happening. She wrote down everything. And in the end, it wasn't a lawyer or executive that unraveled a corporate cover-up. It was the girl who wrote it all down. Word of her actions spread far beyond the bank. Ayanna Brooks quickly became more than a name on a scholarship check. She became a symbol of what happens when you prepare your children not only to succeed, but to speak truth, even when the room doesn't want to hear it. Schools across the country began sharing her story in ethics classes. Social media dubbed her the witness with the journal. Newspapers called her the girl who documented the fall. But Ayanna didn't seek the spotlight. When asked how she stayed calm, she simply said, "My dad told me to write what I saw because someday someone might need to know what the truth looked like." And that's what she gave the world, the truth, unflinching, precise, and delivered without bitterness, just facts, just her voice on paper. The journal was later donated, with Ayanna's permission, to the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture, where it was displayed in a glass case under the exhibit, Youth Voices That Change Systems. Visitors leaned in to read her handwritten notes. No embellishment, no dramatics. Just a girl, a pen, and the belief that what she saw mattered enough to be remembered. Her story inspired new legislation on how minors are treated during financial transactions. Oak Bank implemented a national policy called the Ayanna Protocol, requiring transparency and guardian notification when a minor is held for verification. And Tiana Clark, the only employee who stood by her, was promoted to lead the new Ethics and Equity Office. As for Ayanna, she returned to her middle school not as a celebrity, but as the same quiet, sharp girl with a backpack full of pens and a head full of ideas. But now when she walked into a room, people didn't just see her, they listened. Because Ayanna Brooks didn't force the world to change through noise or protest. She did it with something far more enduring. She wrote it all down, and no one could erase that. There are moments in life that don't just touch our hearts, they shake something loose inside us. The story of Ayanna Brooks, an 11-year-old black girl who walked into a bank to deposit her hard-earned scholarship check and ended up exposing a corporate scandal, is one of those moments. But beyond the headlines, beyond the drama and the courtroom fallout, lies a much quieter, deeper truth. One that reminds all of us, especially those of us with years of wisdom behind us, that courage isn't always loud and justice doesn't always arrive on time. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a small child, a quiet pen, and a notebook no one expected to matter. For older generations, those who've marched, spoken up, been overlooked, or quietly endured, we know that systems don't always break. Sometimes they bend and bend until they snap back against the ones they were meant to serve. We've seen it in waiting rooms, in schools, in job interviews, in banks. And while the setting may change, the feeling doesn't. You walk in prepared and proud, and walk out questioned and diminished. Ayanna's story, though rooted in a new generation, echoes a very old pain. She walked into Oak Bank not as a threat, not as a rebel, but as a child excited to take her first adult step. She had done everything right. She'd won a national STEM competition. She brought her documents. She even brought her best manners. And still, she was doubted, detained, and dismissed. Yet what makes this story powerful isn't just what was done to her, but how she responded. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't fall apart. She wrote. In an age where shouting seems to get the most attention, Ayana reminded us of something many of us were raised on. Documentation is power, composure is resistance, and truth, when written down, cannot be silenced. Her small, leather-bound journal became a sword against silence. She wrote down the exact words used to stall her. She logged the time. She captured names and gestures and phrases. Her diary, something so ordinary, became the one thing that no amount of corporate spin could discredit. And perhaps that is the lesson we must all carry, no matter how old we are. Don't underestimate your record of truth. Whether it's in a journal, a letter, or even a conversation passed on to grandchildren, your experiences, your perspective, your voice, they matter. In a world constantly trying to distract or erase, the simple act of remembering, recording, and retelling is revolutionary. Ayana's actions didn't just change her life. They held up a mirror to an entire institution. Her courage forced executives to listen. Her journal reshaped bank policy. Her voice inspired schools and lawmakers. And she did it all while many were still deciding whether she was even worth hearing. So what can we take from this? We take the truth that dignity doesn't age, and neither does injustice. But more importantly, neither does courage. Whether you are 11 or 81, you still hold the power to stand up. Not always by standing tall, but by standing still and holding your ground. To our older viewers, perhaps you have lived a life filled with stories like Ayana's, unseen, unspoken, unwritten. Let her remind you, it's not too late to share them. It's not too late to open that journal. It's not too late to let your truth be part of the legacy that teaches, that inspires, that defends the next generation when it too is met with silence. Because when one person writes down what everyone else is too afraid to admit, that's when systems change. If this story has touched you, if it stirred memories, if it reminded you that your voice still has value, then please comment with the number 7. Let others know that you believe in stories like these and the power they hold. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful human stories that speak not just to the mind, but to the soul. And most importantly, share this story with someone in your life who feels like no one's listening, someone who's felt stuck, someone who's near the edge. Let Ayana's quiet strength remind them. You don't have to shout to change the world. Sometimes all you need to do is write it down.